Hey, everybody. How's it going? I have got someone so exciting. She is so exciting. She's so exciting that when our power went out today, my husband went and got gas and hooked the generator up to the house so the studio could still run because the show is going to go on. And if that means that we start 13 minutes late, which is an ironic number, we do. Her name is Victoria Burke. And if you know anyone who has ever been assaulted, which you do, because the number is a crazy number, like 1 in 3 for women and 1 in 7 for men, then what she has done is going to make a difference to you or that person that you know. She has created the Speak Your Truth Act that is becoming a law across the country like a wave. And I'm going to bring her in here and she's going to tell us about it. And let me tell you something, you're going to want to get behind this. This is the most important interview that I've had because what she's doing is that important. So I'm going to bring her up. Victoria, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I love being here with you.
Glad that you are here. So Victoria, I don't know how much of your story you tell in public because we didn't talk about that. So do you want to tell us how you decided that the Speak Your Truth Act needed to happen?
Well, for me, it was based upon a personal experience that happened to me, which is no different than happens to a lot of other people. But for me, I just one moment was out to dinner with a male acquaintance. And the next minute I know I'm waking up in the emergency room. I'm coming out of a severe coma. I don't know how I got there. My last memory was being at the lovely restaurant. So I did not expect to end up in the emergency room. And from what I have, figured out is I believe the person I was dining with that he had actually drugged my drink. And I found out later from paramedics that they had discovered me with my top undone and they had reported it as potential sexual assault and likely drugging. I did quote unquote everything you're supposed to do. The checklist, they always say, well, did you do this? Did you timely report? Did you go to the proper authorities? Did you do all the, I did, check. But unfortunately for me, things don't always work out even if you go through the proper channels. What happened was the police ended up losing my blood, which meant that they were not able to send it out to a lab for additional testing to see what exactly was in my system. And they also lost the video evidence of where he held me at a parking lot for over an hour. With these two pieces of evidence not there, prosecution was nearly impossible, though I was pushing for it very hard. And I remember telling one of my friends from law school what happened to me and, how frustrated I was. And she said, oh, be careful. Don't use his name. Don't use any identifiers. Don't do that. And I said, why not? And she said, if you do that, he could sue you for defamation. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I also went to the same law school. As I understand, defamation, you're protected if you're speaking your opinion or the truth. So it's either my opinion, he drugged my drink, or it's true that he drugged my drink. So I should be protected. And she said, please look at what happened in the wave of after the Me Too people came forward. There were all these litigations for defamation lawsuits. And she's a defamation attorney, let me clarify too. So she had seen on the front lines that the press didn't cover. The press covered this magical moment of all these people outing their predators and serial predators and what a great moment this was. What they didn't show is a lot of lawsuits were coming forward where if you did name the person, because when people were encouraged to come forward at Me Too, they weren't told they opened themselves up to this Pandora's box of potentially being sued for defamation. And so I literally went through, was researching. I'm like, oh, this is crazy. I can't talk about it. And I thought, then if he can still control, that's practically a gag over my mouth. And to me, the initial attack had not ended. If he has that much control over me and what I can say, I'm still in the middle of the attack. So I thought, what can I do? I have a background as an attorney. I'm also an adjunct law professor, but I also, for the American Bar Association, used to do committee work where I drafted legislation on behalf of the American Bar Association. So I thought, well, what if I just change the law? What if I just fix it? What if I just, make it better for everybody? Because I knew I wasn't going to be silent. And so I want to make it so nobody had to be silent. And that's basically what I did. I went to work for about a year and a half doing research on cases, statutes, examples. And then when I was comfortable enough, I drafted a bill and I proposed it to the California Legislature kind of as a cathartic journey. And, I sent it off and I wasn't sure anyone would care because I hadn't done anything like that before. But just all of a sudden, my email box was like boop, boop, boop. And I had multiple people wanting to be the author of the bill. 6 months later, the Women's Caucus wanted to join in for the bill and support it as well and be co-authors. And I was told to manage my expectations that it would take 2 to 3 years to pass. In California, it took 1 year. And then I was like, well, I have one state. What about the nation? What about federal protection? Let's just keep it going.
And how many states did you say it's been passed in now?
4, including California. And I have a sponsor who has decided to introduce it in Congress this fall. So I'm ahead of schedule of getting it through Congress, but first up is introduction. And so I'm pretty excited to make that announcement, hopefully soon, about who the person is. But I do have a sponsor who has already said the date, and I'm like, okay.
That is so exciting. So are you working full-time while you're doing this as an attorney too?
Yes, I'm working full-time as an attorney in the data privacy area of the law for class actions representing the plaintiffs. And I also teach fashion law.
Oh, that's exciting.
So I'm all over. I have a lot
different
going on.
So do you travel to try to talk to people, or is this something you're doing virtually? How does that work?
I've had a lot of virtual meetings, but when I can travel, I will. I've been in person in Sacramento, in Oregon, in New York. I try to be there as I can. Surprisingly, a lot of times when the votes come up, it's just like you get like a day or two notice. So that's what's really hard when it goes up to the Judiciary Committee or when the final vote's happening. Sometimes you're just like, oh, it's going to be like 2 days from now. So it might not work with my schedule to, the firm, whether or not I can travel or not. And so when I can be there, I am there. I will definitely be there when it's in Congress. I have found the most surprising thing is like, originally some people are like, oh, this might be a split bill that only one, group would want, or that I have found it's been tremendously bipartisan support. I have had it championed by, Democrats in California. I have had it led by Republicans, have been the main sponsor in multiple states. And one in Oregon that led it to being passed in law is very active, wanting the bill and seized upon it. I found as the one bill we can get together on. We both can agree that's important to protect free speech, basically, which is what this is, the ability to speak your truth, tell people what actually happened to you without being like silenced by a retaliatory lawsuit, which is the most important part.
I honestly had no idea. Now, I know somebody that has been affected who was in the military, and they couldn't say something because there was that, which is another difficult situation. But I had never heard of the defamation until we started talking.
It's something that was not really around. We didn't have this with like Anita Hill. We didn't have this with Blasey Ford necessarily, like where people came forward and said something happened. Let me give you my side and my version of the events. And, nowadays, Anita Hill would have been served like a defamation lawsuit. If it's not stopped here, it could go to like domestic violence, of where there's very little evidence and they're speaking out as a he said, she said. Shouldn't both sides be able to say their version of it? That's something I cling to, is that both sides should be able to say, what their version is. One side could say this happened to me, and one side could be like, I don't agree with the events that night. I think it didn't happen this way. Both sides should be able to speak their truth. That's what I also defend. Both equal sides be able to say what they want to say about being sued for defamation.
Somebody had asked me, they said, what if the person is innocent and they're being accused, right? So what is their, do they have some sort of way for speaking up? And you're saying yes, just not a lawsuit.
They absolutely can. They can, speak up and say, I didn't do this to this person. And they should be able to speak out with that. There has been a rise in lawsuits also against those speaking out saying, like, I didn't do it. Like, you could also be opened up to be sued when you're simply defending yourself. So what I have done is made sure that you can speak it so long as you're doing it in good faith and without malice. Let's say one person wasn't even there that day, and so it's an factual impossibility for this to have even occurred, or if they've had conflicting stories where they said, like, this is the best night of my life, and then maybe they found out the person had like a girlfriend, and then they like changed their story. That, if you can show a trail of that, then therefore you could establish malice. The crazy thing with these retaliatory defamation lawsuits is they're not actually being launched to win. These are almost unwinnable lawsuits anyway, because two people go in a room, two people exit. Nobody knows what happened between those two people. So it's hard to prove the course of events that the person is lying. Or the only time you would ever win, for the most part, in a defamation lawsuit would be as if you showed malice. And so I made it so you had to show malice because there is a private figure standard, which was negligence, and there's a public figure standard, which is malice. So I made them conform to both be equal to malice and raise the standard to that. If you cannot show that they spoke with malice, then you would have to at least pay their attorney fees. So if you drag someone who likely was sexually assaulted to court and just do this in order to, like, you know, make them like shamed and like just kind of, even though you know you did this to them, you'll have to pay their attorney fees. It's kind of a way to discouraging these frivolous lawsuits clogging our judicial system, because they're not, like I said, they're not bringing them forward to win. They're doing it to silence, because the threat of a defamation lawsuit will cause some people to go silent, some people to retract, some people just to go away, because to defend yourself costs 5, 6, 7 figures. And now there's like a cottage industry of attorneys that have now set up a shop in order to go after survivors speaking out. And so they've now made this as a profit thing, because it's very hard to like have the money. You're already usually, there's either a power imbalance, a financial imbalance a lot of times between the victims and the, you know, the alleged abusers that have done this to them. So that's something that this kind of equalizes. So if this is frivolous, if this was only done to retaliate and you were probably never going to prevail in court anyway, then if you do go forward and you cannot show malice, then you have to pay their attorney fees. In some states, you have to pay triple the actual damages, which is in California, and any other punitive damages that the judge has, you know, decide. So it's an incentive to like make sure you have some teeth behind it. Make sure you have that evidence that this was malice, not just like, you know, I'm unhappy this person said this about me. Okay, but can you show malice? Like, you're not going to prevail unless you can anyway. They make it seem like, oh, this is hurting them. Like, you would have had your case dismissed. You just know that you would have financially crippled this person. So for them, that's a win.
I didn't realize how much it costs to bring those cases.
Well, there was one victim I know in California, and she, when she was speaking out, she had said that she talked at the state capitol about her assault, and she was part of my bill, one of the people who testified on behalf of my bill. And she had said when she had started the case, she was like pregnant, and now her child was in like kindergarten when it finally was over. And it dragged on for years of your life just gone because like someone isn't happy that you told the truth.
Well, and the thing is too, is that then you have to remember that and you have to keep talking about it. And so you're reliving it over and over too. And that's the thing. You just are continually victimized.
You're gagged, and so they still have control over what you say, or you're constantly reliving it. And so they keep you whatever way, they still have that control over you. That's what it's all about, is control. Some people love that.
I think people think that it's a sexual thing, but it's absolutely not.
No, it's been shown in studies that it's about control. You know, there's like people, when they like rape elderly people, a lot of times is because they have power over someone incredibly weak and meek. It's one of those things that like maybe they're not succeeding in life, that maybe like, you know, they're not getting ahead in the boardroom, but they can dominate some small little victim.
I don't know. It passes all of my kind of understanding, but I'm so glad that there's at least, some of this is not going to happen to victims again.
I was going to make sure something was going to change. We're not going to stand still anymore.
I love this. So once this passes and we get it, the Senate takes it and they vote on it, which, you know, then what's next? Do you have big plans for something else? Because you are obviously somebody who gets things done.
Well, it's funny because I had a meeting with a member of parliament in New Zealand. So like I have talked to people in different countries, and someone in Canada I spoke about possibly bringing the bill to other countries that have not even thought about it, but are considering these protections are necessary. I'm hoping to go through, finish up some of the other, some of the other states, because I introduced it in 16 states this legislative session. And some states take several years to get it passed. And so I will be finishing out the process of some of them. I mean, Oregon just flew through. I'm like, I've never seen anything like the lightning speed of Oregon. That was just amazing. But Connecticut and Maine were not far behind. They just went, you know, and there's still 3 active states right now that have not closed a legislative session that are making progress with the bill. So we still might add several more before the end of the legislative session for this year. So I'm optimistic, and it'd be great to have some level of federal protection as well.
Does going through this make you revisit what happened, or is it giving you more of that feeling of power and success?
For me personally, when I speak about it, I'm very almost like disassociated from my own experience because I've talked about it so much that it doesn't even feel like it happened to me. I feel like I'm telling someone else's story. Sometimes when I'm testifying before different judiciary committee hearings, I will get a catch in my throat and I'll have to take a pause. And because I'm like, I could almost feel myself crying, but I'm like, I just powered through it. But it's very rare because usually I keep myself removed because I just think of the purpose at the end of the day of how important. I mean, for me, the person who did this to me, I had warned a common institution that we share that this person was a predator, and they didn't heed it, and he went on to sexually harass 2 other people and is now banned from that shared institution that we have. I had always had a worse fear that I wasn't victim 1 and I wasn't going to be the last victim, and that my fears came true. Like, they won't stop. So the only way you can make them stop is at least shedding the light on them, and so that people will know that this person is a problem.
So he's not in the same institution at all. He is doing another
No.
job at this point.
Exactly. So it's something that I had concerns about, and it happened. It's sad when you don't believe a survivor, and then unfortunately the other people had a lot more proof, and they were able to establish it because they had, and he put it in writing what he wanted to do to them. So
that helps.
It was like he literally dotted the I's and crossed the T's. Like, if you didn't believe what happened to me, well, here's someone. He actually wrote out exactly what he was going to do to them. So, and I'm sure he's probably out there doing it today, for all I know.
Did he ever spend time in jail, or?
No. Nope. I haven't even heard back from the detectives on where the case is. They never notified me if it closed or what. Just at one point after a year and a half, they just stopped communicating. They literally did not pursue it. I did all my own investigation for the most part. Like, they still, a year and a half later, had not interviewed the bartender at the bar, which is crazy because they're like, oh, well, we are going to do it. I'm like, well, this late in time, why would the person at the bar, who for them it was a random night, and they wouldn't remember anything. Do you remember that time in that December 2019?
Right.
Why would you remember that? So I went out and got multiple different witnesses and did everything I could in order to move the case forward, because they don't have an interest in this. For some reason, they don't. I remember being at the police station for a meeting with the detectives because I had said, I don't think you're taking this seriously. And so what they did is bring like 4 detectives to me. They are taking it seriously. And I remember one detective said to me, like, well, do you know if this, if your friend was married or not? I'm like, I literally don't know. I hadn't seen this person like 10 years. I don't know. And he was like, so you potentially went out with a married man? I'm like, what? You could see how the mindset was already there. I knew it was going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah. And I know a few years ago, there was a big thing because there was rape kits everywhere. Nobody was sending them in. They were doing the thing, which is traumatizing, to collect what you need to collect. And then no one was sending them in.
It's so many different places they are falling through the cracks. And like, that's why I said justice comes in many forms. It might not be a prosecution. It might be a changed law. There are other ways that you might be able to get justice. Like, I feel like, although I didn't get a prosecution, probably never will, I feel fulfilled that this bill is in place now. So I found, relief in that way, that like, okay, it's not the same, but then again, it's what I had.
So we have somebody in the chat asking if you will go to Kenya and bring it to Kenya. I know her, and she is in law school here in the States. And she's saying, I'm from a tribe and it's difficult to speak freely. It's a lot more difficult than here in the States, which, because that's a completely different system. And
it could be,
so that would be really interesting.
Yes. I mean, like, it starts small, though. This is how it starts. I mean, people didn't realize this law was necessary until it was proposed. And a lot of times people are just getting used to, people be able to speak out. It wasn't long ago that women couldn't have their own credit card. It had to be, their husbands. So I'm like, for us to talk like we're so like much ahead of other countries, like, hey, like women couldn't own property or have bank accounts not too long ago. I remember my mom being so happy having her own like bank account after the divorce. And I never quite comprehended what that meant to her. But when I realized you couldn't have it, that makes sense. So, for a place maybe like Kenya where you are not able to have your voice often, or you're not allowed to have it, small laws and small changes will come along and change it. Like, it starts as a snowball. It starts with one person saying, we're going to stop here. This is the line in the sand. The scary thing is like we're fighting for rights that were already there. We already had the right to speak out. And then someone came along and started suing for defamation. So we're not even fighting for new rights. We're just trying to fight just to maintain the most basic, bare essential. Like, can I at least say something bad happened to me? I'm not okay with it. I mean, that's all we're asking, is to be able to say and speak out like something happened. I'm not okay with it, and I would like you to know. And it's a First Amendment issue as well. It should be protected.
Absolutely. And the people that say, well, that's just going to lead to more people falsely accusing, I really, does that happen? Sometimes, yes. But with
the stats are so low on that. They're between, I believe, 2 to 10%. 10% could also include those that decide not to go forward, not that their claim was false, but that they just wanted to drop the charges because they didn't want to deal with it when they went to the police. Like, it might have been too much for them. I mean, you can name on your hand those who are falsely accused, but can you name on your hand those who weren't? I mean, no, there's so many more that were true. You only hear about the ones that were like, oh, there's like, I can name it. Oh, if you can name them, then there's not that many. Like, I can't name all the women who have been sexually assaulted. Like, for example, let's start there. If you can name every single woman that's been sexually assaulted, good for you. But you could probably pull up how many people have been falsely accused. Well, there is a difference because the rate of like reporting is so low that, that's more of an issue that public interest should be encouraging people to come forward, because we found with the Harvey Weinstein thing, one person came forward, then another. And a lot of times when it was hashtag Me Too, it turned out multiple people had the same serial predator and they didn't know it. And then that person was finally exposed, and that was a benefit to society. I mean, I'm not going out for drinks with Bill Cosby. No.
Yeah, which would have sounded great. And, there's a lot of people that would have sounded great to spend time with. I think societally, we need people to understand that it's not okay to do things to people that they don't want to have done. There is still a subsection of society that thinks it's okay, or it's funny, or it's whatever they think, because I honestly don't understand it, that you can just do what you want to people just because that's what you...
Well, look at Governor Cuomo. Like, he left after he had like 11 accusations, and he's back again. He's like, I wish I hadn't resigned. It's like, but you said you were sorry, so now you're back. And he just got pummeled in the mayoral debates of like, hey, all these people are, coming out, and what you do is he turned around and sued one of his accusers. And what's worse is he keeps threatening. In New York, you file something to say you have intent to file a lawsuit before you file a lawsuit. I don't quite understand how the process works there, but he keeps filling these out, but not actually suing her, enough to threaten her, enough to make her scared. He really did not want my bill going forward in New York. And people were constantly asking him, what about the Speaker Truth Act? And I was told the reason why it didn't go forward in New York this year were the powers that be didn't want it, and powers that be were Cuomo. I'm hoping that next year, if he's not a mayor throwing his power around, that this will not be an issue. I have been warned he's very vengeful, and I'm like, bring it on. Like, pull up. I'm like, I'm not fearing this person whatsoever. This bill is more important than him. Like, it had nothing to do with him. The bill was already in progress, so it wasn't targeting him. He just happened to be suing one of the people who made allegations against him, for defamation. So he kind of put himself right in the middle. This bill had already been introduced in New York in 2023. It's just one that takes several years to go through, and this is going to be our year. So, I'll be back again. I don't know what causes someone to have that level of audacity, but it should definitely be studied.
That's just wild. So do you have to reintroduce it again? Or
Yes,
is it
reintroduced. Yes, it gets reintroduced every time it's been, brought forward every year. And that's just how the process works with multiple states. Like some states literally take several times to introduce it. I was just surprised with California when they said manage your expectations. It'll take 2 to 3 years, like which they mean 2 to 3 times. You only have a small window to get support. And so then, if you aren't able to get enough support or not enough people, because sometimes there are like a lot of bills out. And so you can't get as many in front of as many people as you want. But like the more they hear about it every year, and now there's so many states going, it's like, why aren't you passing it? Why aren't you putting it on your legislative agenda? This is something you would probably want. It costs nothing fiscally, and it's very rewarding. It also clears up the clog in your judicial system.
just a win-win-win,
It
except
is.
for a small group of people?
I mean, the people who have issue with it, I'm like, interesting. Okay, good to know. Like, you're saying a lot about yourself.
Because really, what is the other downside?
They want to bring these lawsuits forward to silence, intimidate, and the same people who love to be in control, the same people who love power. I mean, anyone who has honestly been falsely accused, my heart goes out to them too. Like I said, my bill is meant to protect them as well, speaking out for them to be able to defend themselves, without being sued, because they don't see it. You could be sued for defamation for defending yourself. It's just that most victims don't have the same amount of money as those who are accused have usually more money. But if you start seeing more people with more money, they could start turning around suing. And how do you prove that someone didn't do it? It's very hard. It's again, so the same standard of malice would come into play there.
So you've got everybody protected
That was my hope.
who's legitimately needing protected.
Yes, that's why I said you honestly have nothing to fear. This is the same standard that would have been in place. It's just conforming the laws so that they have the same protection all the way around, clearing up the loopholes in the anti-slap legislation that already exists, that they had to find the public interest to include sexual harassment, sexual assault. Back in the old days, that was just between a husband and wife. We didn't talk about those things, behind closed doors. That's why it's considered a private matter. It's very odd. Let's say you're walking through the park and a mugger punches you in the face. That's a public matter, but if he ends up like sexually assaulting you, it's possibly private matter now. So it's very odd, the way the laws are. You have to make sure they're brought up to date, and they're not brought up to date with how people talk. When they said, you could speak out in like a setting such as like a legislative setting, a police, report, all this stuff, they still think of the town square. Like they're setting up as if we're going to go out to a formal town square and this is where everything's done. No, the town square is now on social media. It's now telling your best friend over coffee. It's telling the HR at work, hey, something's going on. I need to tell you. There was a case in Oregon. One of the people who testified was a teenager, and she had mentioned it on Snapchat that this boy had sexually assaulted her, and his family went on to sue her. And then, so her family was having their home insurance company defend him. The home insurance company decided to sue them as well. So they were having, for putting them in that position, to have to defend him. So they were having to deal with 2 lawsuits, but she prevailed. She prevailed and won against his defamation, and she is very excited about the law in Oregon being passed. She was very, vocal, and was a proud, person testifying about it. She was very strong, but she should not have had to go through that as a teenager. This is not only should she have just spent the time healing, but she had to relive it and relive it and relive it. It's just terrible. But hearing her story, I'm like, how do I testify after that? Because I'm almost sobbing. Because it was so powerful listening to her, but she was so brave.
I don't know. I'm so impressed by you. You really are. Hillary said in the chat that you're a hero. You really are to so many people who, if they may have not have gotten justice, but at least somebody's going to. And knowing that, I think.
Yeah. A lot of times you don't know someone's fighting for you behind the scenes and that someone cares about you. But there are so many people fighting for survivors. And then behind the scenes, like, it's not just me. I've met so many people in different advocacy groups out there. They're working day and night. You are cared for, you are loved, you are important. Your story matters. What happened to you was not fair, was not okay. And, we're here. I'm here on your behalf. If you don't want to step up, that's fine. You don't ever have to go into light. I always say that to people. You don't ever have to come forward with your story. Your story is yours. If you want to tell it, I want to make it safe for you to tell it. If you never want to tell it, that's also fine. Met people along the way that I was the only one they've told, and it's been 20 years. It might have happened to them in college 20 years ago. That's why when people say, like, oh, I don't believe this person, they didn't report it. Well, I've met a lot of people that are in powerful positions that you'd be surprised did not feel okay, going forward about it for whatever reason. It belongs to them. Maybe they knew it would turn out like how it did. Like, people ask me, if you had to do it again, would you have come forward? I'm like, I don't know. It was a lot going through with the police, day in and day out, like doing my own investigation, calling, having to hear them not care. I mean, I had seen all these wonderful movies where you're going to get this female detective and she's going to come in and she's going to care and she's going to like tear up the system and get you justice. Oh no, I had a female detective that could give less of a blank, and so I had the opposite, but I still had to know my value. There are some good cops out there, but you also have some crap ones too that just like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to deal with this. They'd rather do like murders, gang shootings, whatever. They just feel like this is small. It's hard to prosecute. The ones that are hard to prosecute, they don't want to have to deal with it. It's not good for them.
That just blows my mind. It really does. Because I hate to say like a man that wouldn't understand. I know men that it's happened to. For them, it's even harder sometimes to come forward.
I
because
do feel badly that they sometimes are minimized. Like sometimes it's always about women. And so they might not feel comfortable, coming forward at all because they feel like they're going to feel like less of men or something like that. But it happens to everybody. It can happen to everybody. Whenever I speak, if I speak about like women, I notice like it happens a lot in higher proportion to women just because their physical strength is less than males. So a lot of times people use control over them. But I do recognize that it does happen to men of all sizes, and it's not fair. I was thinking about it just then about like the police officer as an example of, the detective of like not caring. I had asked her, is this happening a lot? And she's like, well, I just got like another report like a few days ago at the AMC theater that someone believes that they were drugged at the theater at the bar there. The AMC was real close to where the police department is, within walking distance. I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, what do you do? It's just like, why I took the report. I'm like, wait a minute. That bar is just down the street. He might still be there. You would have, possibly the glass might not be washed. You can have fingerprints pulled off the tab he signed. You would have credit card numbers, names, video. You didn't do it. You didn't go and get this evidence. The evidence is right there. The women were right there. And I think she told him to go get like to the hospital if they didn't feel well and stuff like that. But I'm like, yes, that's important. But she, as the cop, could have gone over there. And I instantly thought of 10 different ways she could have preserved evidence. But she didn't care. She didn't care about my evidence, lost it all. This is the thing. If you don't have a cop that cares, you won't get justice. So I still encourage people to come forward. It's hard, but it's your own decision. It's hard and difficult because you won't be believed. Oftentimes, it's a struggle. It's a process. You may not get any justice at the end after going through all that. That's why I said everyone makes their own decision. I never blame someone when they don't come forward. That's up to them. I don't think they're someone not to be believed. That's not the case. Like, there's lots of reasons why they don't come forward.
But you're just helping give them the ability to, if they have
the option now, they're protected. So, how great is that? If someone tries to bully you with this lawsuit, then they have to pay your attorney fees, then triple your damages. Like, when you cash that check, you're going to feel pretty good the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not going to bring it back, but maybe it will slow them down a little or make them at least feel some sort of consequence because
takes back your control. Like, they wanted to take away, they wanted silence, they wanted to intimidate. And then when they're having to feel the consequences of their actions, that they're bullying, well, there you go.
I know that you have a lot of things to do. Is there anything that you want to say, though, before we go? I think you've covered some incredible things, and I just want to thank you so much.
Well, anyone who wants to add me on LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to add them if they, would like me to come to their state with, the law or try to bring it there. I might already be in process. Just let me know if they would want to, they don't have to help, but if they would like it there or if they would want to lend a hand, let me know. Lend a hand means like possibly calling their, legislator and saying, hey, support this bill, something like that, or providing written testimony or in-person testimony. I just know I do care about them a lot. I've met them along the way. Their stories mean something to me, and I carry them with me wherever I go. Whenever the bill gets passed, I think of those victims in the particular state and the nation, and they're close to my heart.
And if you're watching, or I'm not going to give her LinkedIn out on here, but you can, jenhardy.net is my website, jenhardy.net/contact, and you can contact us. Just give us your contact information. If you don't say that, we can't get back to you. But if you'll reach out there, we'll put that in the chat. We'll put it in the description. And that's just a good, safe way to go. Thank you again, Victoria. And thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Hill, for bringing her here. This has been incredible. And to all of you who are watching, you are loved. Be safe. And if something happens, it's okay to go tell somebody and maybe help some other people from having it happen to them.
And thank you, Jen.
Oh, you're welcome. I really am. I'm so thankful. All right. Bye, everybody. Mwah! We love you so much.